Welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. I'm excited to welcome to the podcast today, Sae Kwon, Vice President of Customer Experience at Cisco. Today, we're going to be talking a bit about some of the trends that Sae has recognized related to customer experience and how he and his team at Cisco are adapting to meet and exceed with the new and evolving circumstances. Sae, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you.
Happy to have you. It is my Thursday night and Sae's Friday morning. So I was just telling him before we went live that I'm jealous that he's a little bit closer to the weekend than I am. So Sae,
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, yeah. All right, so before we dig into the topic, tell us first a little bit about yourself and your history with Cisco.
Okay, so I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and I went to the University of Sydney and studied computer science there. And I joined another company before Cisco as a programmer, software programmer, spent a few years there, and then I joined Cisco. When I joined Cisco, it was 1996 as a call center agent in the technical assistance center. And when I joined, I thought about what can I do to get ahead in a company like Cisco. And I looked around and there was a certification called CCIE, Cisco Certified Internet Networking Expert. And I did that, and then I became an engineer in the Technical Assistance Center. And then I had the most amazing career in Cisco over the 24 years, which I can go into more detail if you want.
Yeah, and you and I, when we spoke before, we talked about how great it's been for you having been with a company for that long, but never having gotten bored or, feeling really the need to go anywhere else because you've been able to do a lot of different things and continue learning and growing and expanding your skill set and, having a lot of new experiences. You feel free to tell us a bit more. I would love to hear it.
Yeah. So, I'll give a short summary first, and then I'll go into a bit more detail. But in a short summary, 24 years, I probably didn't have the same role for more than 2 or 3 years at a time. So every 2 or 3 years, my role was changing. Also, I had the opportunity to work across 4 different countries in roles that were country leadership role or regional leadership role. So it's just been really exciting. A lot of opportunities were there, whether it's moving to another country or doing a different role. One of the first big opportunity I had was in year 2000. That's when Korea was going through an internet boom at that time. The government was really encouraging the service providers there to roll out high-speed internet in Korea. So our business was doing very well over there, and we needed to set up a Korean Technical Assistance Center in Korea. So they Cisco asked me to go to Korea and set that up. And that was a huge opportunity for me because until then I was an engineer. That's when I had the opportunity to manage, lead a business, build a business. It sort of felt like a venture company within a company because I had the opportunity to build a business plan, put the processes in, hire people, and set up the Technical Assistance Center in Korea. So I did that, and I spent about 4 years in Korea, just making sure that the whole Technical Assistance Center was settled in. And then I passed it on to a local manager and came back to Sydney. Then spent 6 years in Sydney doing various regional roles, like focused technical support, which is a premium service for the top customers where we have dedicated engineers and operations managers to support them. And then in 2010, I had the opportunity to go to Japan and lead technical services in Japan, which was another huge opportunity. I never imagined I'd work in Japan because I don't speak Japanese. I don't have any ties or any background there, but went there Had a great time. Really big business in Japan, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And the people there were fantastic. So I spent about 2.5 years there. Excuse me, really enjoyed working there, helped grow the business. Was involved with some of the recovery efforts during the big Japan earthquake as well, which was really good to give back. And then came back to Sydney. At that time, I did something called service enablement, which is sort of like a business development role, but really focused on new services. So whenever we would launch a new service, this team would go in there, build a plan on how do we enable sales, how do we accelerate, and just get the ball rolling. And then once it's the business is up and running, then it goes, the sales teams take over. And then I had the opportunity to lead technical services for APJC. That's when I moved to Singapore about 3 years ago. And then about 2 years ago, we went through a huge transformation in Cisco, from Cisco services to customer experience. That's when we realized that we can't just have reactive services. We needed to be thinking about the whole life cycle of the customer's journey, right from the pre-sales to design, implementation, onboarding, adopt, and to support, and then to renewal as well, because we wanted to make sure that we were helping the customer all along their life cycle as they use their solutions. So that's where I am now. But it's been a really exciting 24 years.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really cool that you've been able to spend that much time with Cisco and always, feel challenged and feel satisfied and fulfilled. I mean, it speaks to, when you have a good gig, right? Just hang on to it and keep, having those great experiences. I also always think it's interesting when I speak with someone who's in a customer experience role that has had a long tenure with a company, because I think it gives you a unique perspective of how customer needs and expectations have evolved over time. And, for someone like yourself who has worked in different regions of the business, different areas of the business, it gives you a unique perspective on, some of the ideas of how Cisco can adapt to meet those needs. So, so very cool. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you and I connected previously, we talked about Cisco's journey toward being a more solution-centric business, right? Which is a journey that a vast majority of companies are somewhere on. And you mentioned the customer journey. So I know, we talked a bit about how you at Cisco over the last, little while have noticed some areas in the customer journey that you needed to evolve to meet some new demands. So I know that you've kind of restructured the business a bit to meet those. Tell our listeners a little bit about the evolution of what the customers are needing from you and how you're adapting to meet those needs.
Yeah, so if I go back to when I started with Cisco 24 years ago, we were basically selling hardware boxes, right, with software on there, but it was being sold as a product, a hardware product on its own, and services attached to that. And then we realized that customers were not buying just that box. They were buying a solution, essentially. It's many boxes connected together, but it's a solution. So I can't remember exact time, but it was in the 2000s. That's when we introduced what we call solution support, because we didn't, we had many different types of products that made up a solution, and the customers sometimes were getting very confused in terms of, okay, where is the problem lying when they had an issue, right? So we introduced solution support where we said, hey, Mr. Customer, you don't have to worry about where the problem is. You just call us when you see the problem. We'll do that searching for you and find out where it is and hide that complexity for you. So that's one of the evolutions we had in the early stages. The other one was, I talked about focused technical support before, the premium level services where we have dedicated engineers and operations managers. That's another one that we introduced in the 2000s because we realized again that when the customer calls us, we spend a lot of time just trying to understand the customer's network environment, the IT environment. But when you have a dedicated engineer and operations manager that already understands the customer's environment, when a problem occurs, that troubleshooting and finding that root cause and the resolution becomes so much faster, right? So that's another one. And also, I'm going to talk about it a bit more later, but services, although it's around technology, at the end of the day, it's all about people, and having dedicated people that not only knows your infrastructure, but has a relationship with you as a person is also really good, because when you don't know the person and you're in a network down situation, you're under pressure. I'm talking from a customer perspective. You're under pressure from your bosses. Things can get really heated. But when you have someone you can trust in Cisco, that you know that he knows my environment, right? That's when you can have a much more productive and constructive discussions and troubleshooting, so that you can find the resolution faster. So I think that was a really good service that the customers liked. So that was in the early stages, and then we looked at all the intellectual property that we had collected over the few decades of service that we were providing to our customers, and we realized that a lot of the basic questions were repeated over and over again. So we put that in online and made it possible for the customers to do self-service. That made it possible for us to focus our engineers onto the most complex issues. For the simpler, repeatable issues, customers can come in and just get the answers through self-service online. And which it allows us to provide a more cost-effective service, but also allowed us to focus our top engineers onto that complex issues that the customers really needed the attention on. So that's the other evolution that we did. And then we also looked at analyzing and using those intellectual property and using analytics to start to see how we can predict issues from occurring, because we realized that there were patterns. There's certain patterns in the network were occurring before an issue would occur, right? So using those patterns, we used to call them digital signatures. Using those patterns, we could start to tell the customers that, hey, Mr. Customer, if you see these patterns in your network, you may be hitting this problem. So let's take an action to avoid that. So we can start to help our customers to avoid problems from occurring, because fast troubleshooting is good, but when the trouble doesn't occur, it's even better, right? So that was the other thing that we were doing. So we were going through that evolution, and then the most recent transformation that we did that I talked about 2 years ago is when we thought, okay, it's not just about the problem. It's not just about troubleshooting or avoiding the problem. We have to start right from when the customer purchases our solution. We have to help them design it well. And we had professional services team that did the design, right? We already had that. But we didn't have anyone that really helped the customers to onboard the solution into their business and build a plan on how to adopt and consume that within their business. Because customers would have had a business requirement, and that's the reason why they bought our solution for a certain outcome that they were thinking about. But we were not in there helping them. We were leaving it to the customers, right? And that's the transformation that we did 2 years ago when we moved from Cisco services to customer experience, was to bring professional services and technical services, which we already had, but they were in siloed departments, bring them together, and then create customer success, what we call customer success, where we had the onboarding and adoption capabilities. And we're starting to see some really good outcomes, and customers are starting to give us some really good feedback, both verbally as well as from a business standpoint as well. So we can see some really good early signs.
Yeah. I think it's such an important thing to talk about in terms of, a few aspects. I mean, one is examining that customer journey often enough and carefully enough to recognize where those gaps exist, right? I think it sounds very simple, but companies get in, just in the day to day, and they don't always think to do that or take the time or resources to do that. And to your point, you had the professional services team, so on the front end, and you had technical services there to help them in a later stage, but there was this big gap in between that was a fantastic opportunity for Cisco as a business to tackle, and then also a fantastic opportunity for you to endear yourself to your customers because you're fulfilling a very valid need that they have. The other point that I think is important to touch on is, as you mentioned, the need when you look at the customer journey and when you look at customer experience to break down some of those silos, right? I mean, yeah, I'm sure the professional service team was doing a fantastic job, and I'm sure the technical services team was doing a fantastic job. But if you don't have a function looking at that bigger picture and really looking at it from that customer perspective of where those gaps are and how to fill them, you can have a siloed operation where everyone's doing a great job, but it's still not creating, a consistent, seamless customer experience. So I think that's really interesting. So as you've been on this journey, in identifying these needs and working as a business to pivot and adapt to restructure to be able to meet them, are there any lessons you've learned or tips you would share for other organizations that are kind of doing this work of exploring the customer journey, looking for opportunities to provide new and different services, that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that come to my mind is timing, because we had professional services and technical services, and they were both very successful businesses on their own right. It was a separate organization, but very successful businesses. But we could see in the longer term that we needed that customer success function as well, and we needed to bring the teams together. It was a very difficult decision, but we needed to make it at that time, and we couldn't afford to wait until these businesses started to slow down. So, but as you can imagine, at that time, when you have very successful large businesses, it's hard to make that decision to disrupt, because you're disrupting a lot of people, a lot of organizations. And I think I once described it as we put everything into a box, shook it, turned it upside down, and then put it down, and then we started from there. Right? It sort of felt that way at the time. But having that courage to disrupt early on, I think is really important. It can be very risky and scary, but if you do that, then you have a very strong business that's sort of slowing down, plateauing. But if you make that transformation at the right time, then you can go through that growth curve again. I think that, so timing is so important, and having the courage to disrupt earlier is really important. And then it's all about people, change management, because services business is our most important asset in our services business is our people, right? So we want to make sure that we talk about the why. Why are we doing this? So that people will buy into it. And it takes time. Some people buy into it faster, some people buy into it later, but it takes time, and we need to take everyone through that journey, through the change journey, and then bring them along through that journey. So I think those two are probably the main things. There's a lot of other things that you got to be thinking about, timing and change management, just making sure that you bring the people along.
Yeah, I think, the timing point I really like, because, I often say you can't just stay with the status quo, right? But I think that sometimes there's a interpretation of status quo as average, right? And in this case, the status quo was really good, right? And the status quo was going very well. So to your point, it becomes even more difficult to decide to disrupt that status quo because it's working well, right?
Yeah.
But if you recognize this opportunity for it to work even better, you know, to your point, you need to move when the time is right to realize the full value from doing that. So I think that's a really important point. So as you've been on this journey the last few years with the new customer success function and your role with customer experience, there's a number of sort of trends that have surfaced that you've realized and are working around. The first is, you know, we had a discussion and it relates to the introduction of customer success, because it's, you know, basically the idea of customers wanting outcomes. You know, they don't necessarily want a product or a service. You know, they want peace of mind. They want business partners, solution providers. So tell us a little bit more about what you've seen as it relates to customers demanding outcomes.
Yeah, you know, we've seen a trend where we, you know, I think probably up to about 10 years ago, we were talking mainly to IT departments and selling to them. So we were mainly doing technology selling, you know, faster, you know, easier to use, easier to operate, you know, technology selling. But the trend we saw since that is it's the business owners. So the business functions, not the IT departments, business functions and business owners were looking for solutions, whether to adopt within their organization or to adopt the technology solution that could help them to differentiate against their competitors, right? So banking is a great example. I think, you know, banking has gone through, during the last decade, they've gone through a huge transformation, right? Where in the past, they used to have, you know, branches with people everywhere. A lot of the banks have many less branches now, and it's a lot of online banking, and they're enhancing that, you know, all the time, right? Even the branches have become, you know, very digitized, even when you walk into the branches. So you can see, you know, that sort of transformation. So we're now starting to talk to people that are not necessarily IT people, they're business people. So they look for a certain outcome or a business solution, and we have to package our solutions in that way for them.
Yeah.
Right? So that's from a product and services perspective, and then a product, hardware and software perspective. And then from a services perspective, we have to do the same because the company's moving in that direction, solution selling. So that's why we have to introduce solution support and make sure that you know, we're not leaving the customers to you know, go through the complexity. We want to hide the complexity, let the customers allow them to focus on their business. So that's one area. And then the other area that we see in terms of changing how the customers want to work with us is how they want to buy. In the past, they wanted to buy and own. But what we're seeing more and more customers not wanting to buy it and own it, but they want to buy and pay as they go, pay as they use. Right. So that's the other model that we call a subscription model. And that's the other model that we see becoming more and more popular amongst the customers because they have budget constraints. They don't want to you know, spend a large amount of capital upfront. They want to be able to stagger that. So that's the other trend that we're seeing in terms of change.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I often say, I mean, the future of service, I think, is learning how to master all of this complexity to present simplicity. I mean, that's what customers want. And I think that, you know, there is so much complexity on the back end for a company to deliver seamless, simple service and customer experience. But getting good at that is really, you know, what needs to happen.
So if I can jump in, I mean, in terms of outcomes and solutions, I think last 9 months has been really interesting. because of COVID-19. And those required some solutions that, we never thought about before, like remote workforce, working from home solutions,
Right.
Secure connectivity. And now the solutions that customers are asking for is return to the office solutions. Right? So those type of solutions. So it's not technology solutions anymore. I mean, it's made up of technology, but solutions are real business outcomes that the customers are looking for now.
Yes, yes. And I think, that's another good point. I was talking to a company a couple of months ago, and he was kind of venting, and saying, I'm just really frustrated because we've deployed IoT and no one's buying it, and I said, well, I mean, have you thought about that's because your customers don't care if you're using IoT? I mean, that doesn't matter to them. That's not, they care about what pain of theirs that can solve, So it's interesting when you really dig into how this world is evolving and the level of complexity companies have to take on to evolve and be successful. Because it isn't just technology. It's how you sell. It's how you market. It's how you're operationally structured. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. I find it really interesting and exciting, which is why I love what I do. But it's a lot of hard work, to keep up with the way things are changing and what customers are demanding. So you've mentioned a couple times since we've been speaking today that one of probably arguably the most important ingredient to all of this is people, right? So to your point, you can have this great vision. If you don't have change management, it's going nowhere. You can have the best technology. If people aren't on board, it's not going to help, right? So we know that people are absolutely imperative to companies accomplishing this mission and being able to deliver the customer experience you want. And one of the questions that comes up a lot right now is around the issue of recruiting and hiring and retaining good talent, because not only is it important, but it's increasingly, difficult to come by. So tell us a bit about, your thoughts on people as it relates to customer experience and how Cisco is tackling the whole hiring, developing, and retaining of good talent.
Yeah, so I'll start with hiring. I think our hiring processes have evolved over time as well. And at the moment, we're really focusing on making sure that we tap into the diversity because, let's look at gender diversity, for example. We don't have that many female IT engineers. There's very few. Which means we're missing out on half the world's talent, right? So it's just making sure that we tap into and can bring in the whole talent, whether it's gender diversity or whether it's cultural diversity. So what we're doing at the moment is trying something called blind interviews, right? Just not knowing what the background or any of the other, just looking at the skills and experience and so forth, and that's working out really well, and that's helping for us to hire and tap into the much more diverse workforce and bring them in, which has been working really well. And then I think once we bring people into the company, I think what we need to do is we need to create an environment where it's you're not working like a robot, because one of the challenges that we had in about 10, 15 years ago, in the early times of when I joined, is technical assistance center can easily be seen as a call center, right? But engineers don't like working in a call center. They want to be innovating. They want to be troubleshooting. They want to be creative. They want to be empowered, right? So trying to create that environment where the engineers feel like they're coming in, they're growing, they're they're innovating. That's really important. But they still need to pick up the phone and talk to the customer and help the customer. But in an environment where it doesn't feel like a call center, it feels like a place where they're innovating and they're really empowered to make decisions. So that's the other area that we try to really create, so that our technical assistants and engineers don't feel like a call center agent and working off scripts, but they're really empowered to support the customers. Of course, there are processes and tools and trainings that we provide to our engineers, because we also need to make sure that the experience that our customers have with our technical assistance center is consistent, right? Sure. We can't have like inconsistent levels of. In the early days, we used to have that, customer would talk to engineer A, have a great experience, talk to engineer B, not so great experience. So we wanted to make sure that we sort of make that more consistent through trainings, soft skills trainings and things like that. But you could still have a consistent. You can still provide a consistent experience, but also provide an environment where engineers feeling like they're innovating and they're empowered. And then the other one is, I think, fun. I think, just making sure that, people are having fun as they come in is also important. I mean, some people may say, work doesn't have to be fun. You can have fun outside, but if work can be fun, it's so much more better, right? Yeah. So creating that environment where people can come in and enjoy each other's company, work hard, but also have fun. I think that's so important. So creating that sort of environment through, it's not always just fun events. I think it's the culture that the company creates, the culture that the managers creates for their their teams. It's also really important for the engineers to come in and feel like they're being valued and they're enjoying where they come in. And then the other one is just creating a lot of different growth opportunities, like I've personally gone through, making sure that if you want it, there are many different opportunities there are. And Cisco is one of the companies that's a global company. Luckily, we can provide a lot of different opportunities, whether it's different function, different city, different country, depending on what people want to do, what they want to work towards. Of course, you don't just get it, you have to work towards it. But if you want to work towards it, there is an opportunity to do there are many opportunities to do other things. So I think all of those things come together to provide that environment where once people come in, they don't necessarily want to leave, because everything is provided here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And like you said, you're a good testament of Cisco's ability to create that environment that people want to stay in. So I think that's really good. I've written a few articles in my time talking about, the correlation between employee engagement and employee satisfaction and the customer experience, so I think sometimes when companies go down the customer experience path, they can do so at the cost of also focusing on the employee experience and what do their employees need. And it is really important to consider how big of a piece of the puzzle it is, because you can't rely on disconnected unhappy people to deliver this amazing experience to your customers.
I think that's a really good point, because when I was working in the technical assistance center and managing the team there, you sometimes think that customers, because you're on the phone, you're not seeing each other. Customers may not know how the engineer is feeling, but they know. If the engineer is empowered, is passionate, is happy, they know. Yes. If the engineer is not happy, they know as well. So making sure that engineers are really motivated, really empowered, happy is so important.
And to your point, yes, that comes through. If you can create an environment, like you said, yes, you want to have standards and you want to have expectations, but then give these people the freedom to be themselves a bit and to be engaged. And, that's what makes them committed and into what they're doing. And that 1,000% comes through, Yep. So I think that's a really good point. I want to talk a little bit about some of the trends you've seen related to how different technologies play a role in the customer experience. So we've touched on a few, but let's go back through and just talk a bit. So we talked about an increase in acceptance of remote support, as well as self-service. So tell us a little bit what you're seeing related to, you know, maybe a change in perception from the customer side of the value of those tools and how it can benefit them.
Yeah, so self-service, the benefit of self-service is you don't have to wait in the phone queue.
Mm-hmm.
You can just go in, search for solutions, and the solutions are there. And I think as the younger generations come into the workforce, they're more used to that type of activity, you know, online activity. So I think that really suits them really well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
self-service is becoming bigger and bigger, and that really helps us to run a much more efficient operations, because we can solve a bulk of the customer queries through self-service, online self-service, right? Remote delivery, that's also really important, because in the past, everyone wanted to do things face to face. Everyone said, come on site, meet me face to face. But with you know, some of the tools that we have, like you know, we have in Cisco, we have our Cisco WebEx tool, which is a similar one to what we're using now, and you know, we use that to have meetings with our customers, discussion, whiteboarding, troubleshooting, sharing information. All of that can occur through there, and especially during the COVID-19 situation when no one could travel, this has become a sort of an opportunity, a huge opportunity for us to demonstrate the capabilities of these tools that we had, right? And again, it allows us to be more efficient, provide a better ROI to the customer as well. And the other thing that it does is also, if you focus on site and face-to-face delivery or face-to-face engagements, you can only tap into your local resources. But Cisco being a global company, we have experts all over the place. And when we have the remote capability, now we can start to bring in the best talent from all around the world for that customer, right? So I think that's the other opportunity that this brings up. You can tap into the top talent everywhere, anywhere, right? Of course, you have to watch the time zones, but yeah. But that's the other big advantage that it opens up that I see.
Yeah. You know, I'm a people person, and I really miss, you know, face-to-face events and all of that. But I do absolutely agree that, you know, this situation has kind of forced folks to realize how much can be done remotely, you know, and so there's certainly a time and place for, you know, seeing people in person and all of that. But it is interesting how there's a lot more openness to some of these things than there was just a very short time ago.
Yeah, I don't think technology, you know, no matter how good the video conferencing technologies, I don't think will ever, you know, 100% replace face-to-face. I think, you know, humans need that human interaction.
Right.
That's always going to be there. But I think, like the self-service has played a role in making us more efficient, I think this will do that as well. And we'll be able to provide a much better service using these tools.
Yeah.
But it will never replace 100% face-to-face.
When you were talking about self-service, you know, I was thinking it's such a delicate balance to get right. You know, I mean, the role you're in and just the jobs that play a part in that customer experience, you know, like you want to make them feel empowered to solve problems on their own when they want to. But boy, when they want to talk to someone needs, you know, I mean, it's just, I'm thinking of, I don't want to name any names because that's not nice, but I'm thinking of a service experience I had not too long ago where I had an issue, and no matter how frustrated you are, you can't get someone on the phone, you know, and while I would rather do, self-service, if it gets to that point, you know, and then you don't have the help you need, it's just incredibly frustrating. So it's a big puzzle of making sure that, you know, whatever your customer wants, you know, however they want to interact and whatever those preferences are, you know, you're there to meet those needs.
Yeah, I think the key is giving our customers a choice on how they want to interact with us, and whatever method they choose, we need to be there ready. Just because we have self-service option, it doesn't mean that we can start to neglect the technical, you know, the phone calls, right?
Right.
We need to make sure that if the customer want to call us, you know, we're there and we're picking up the phone quickly and we're responding back to them quickly. We need to make sure, and we continue to look at time to pick up and time to respond stats, so that we can ensure that we have enough people there to support those customers when they need to call us as well. So
Right.
I mean, that's the balance that, so important, that balance.
Like you said, it's taking on all of that complexity so that when a customer wants to self-serve or they want to call or whatever, you know, someone's there. But when you think about what's going on in the back end, you know, it's pretty impressive. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, you had talked about Cisco's move toward predictive service and all of the data you have at this point, and being able to notice those patterns and start to work with customers to predict some of the issues you know will likely arise. How do you see your use of, you know, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data? How do you see that expanding in the coming, you know, couple of years?
I think that's gonna. I think the word I would use would be that's gonna explode. I think, you know, that's gonna be a huge opportunity to leverage AI and intellectual property and the data that we have and combine that together. It's gonna be so powerful, and it's again similar to self-service and remote. This is going to be another tool that's going to help us to provide our customers with much better solution, much more consistent and data-based support that our customers are looking for, reliable support that our customers are looking for. You know, similar to self-service and remote support, I don't think AI will ever 100% displace people, because people are, you know, always going to be at the core, because once the automation or AI comes in and comes up with a solution, there's got to be some people that sort of goes through that and analyzes that and makes that relevant for their customer, because every customer is a little bit different. Their environment, depending on where they, you know, what country they're in, what business vertical they're in, and what market their customer bases are, they're all very different. So it, you know, there's always got to be that you know, the people there, and customers always want to have the choice of being able to talk to people as well, as we just talked about. So, but I think the AI part is going to explode, and it's going to be a huge opportunity for us and for our customers as well.
Yeah, and you know, when you start thinking about when you draw the parallels between outcomes-based service and predictive analytics, you know, I mean, there is no better outcome than a customer just having peace of mind that their systems are going to continue working, right? So, I mean, it's sort of the ultimate outcome. So the more capable companies can get in leveraging that data they have to really analyze where those failure points often are, and, you know, really get ahead of those things. You know, it's making strides in delivering the best possible outcomes that people are going to be willing to pay for.
Yeah, and it's going to be so much more important because technology is becoming more and more complex. Although, like on the surface, you know, when you use it, it's making life so much easier, or making businesses so much more competitive. You know, they can differentiate. But at the back end, how the technology comes together is so complex, right? And you need to make sure that you know, you have the right people to, you know, be able to put that together. But, you know, having AI, having all the different tools to help go through the complexity is going to be really important as well. Because you know, these days when you look at one solution, it's not just one technology. There's you know, there could be the network that needs to be put together, and then there's got to be security, And then there's got to be some data center ability, and then there's got to be virtualization ability, and then there's got to be collaboration, video conferencing. All they need to come together to form a solution that provides that business outcome for the customer, right?
Right.
So it's going to get even more complex as we go, because these things will probably, even the customer solutions will have things like AI and automation that come in and start to bring all these different technologies together. So I sometimes, feel a little bit sorry for our engineers, because when we go into, when I used to troubleshoot, there were maybe 2 or 3 products in a solution. Now, when our engineers go into troubleshoot, there's many, many different products, and they need to understand that. And it's not easy for one or 2 engineers to understand it, everything. So they need to work together. And when you can have things like AI and automation tools come in and help our engineers, it makes it so much better. So complexity is another reason why AI is going to be so important, and automation is going to be so important.
Yeah, to your point, it frees them up to work on the things that, if you can automate some of the more simple things, it frees them up to work on the things that their expertise, really is needed for. So last question, Sae, is what's the biggest lesson you as a customer experience leader have learned that you think others could benefit from hearing?
The first one is listening to customers. That's where everything starts from, right? We need to, continue to talk to customers and listen to them, because their needs are always changing, their requirements are always changing, and you need to be able to move with that. That will be the number one thing. And then number 2 would be look after your people. Make sure that you hire the best people, train them and retain them, and help them to grow within the company. Because motivated employees will look after your customers, right? So that's so important. And then 3rd one would be continue to disrupt. And it's not always easy, especially when you have a very successful business, right? But you have to continue to disrupt, especially in the technology area that I work in.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you spoke earlier about timing and having the courage to take those chances. I think that's a really good message for folks. And certainly, I think there's a lot of organizations that have really good intentions on customer experience, but they start to go down these paths on a lot of assumptions. Versus, actually talking to the customers, and not only talking to them, but listening and really hearing what they're saying. So it sounds like, kind of customer experience, listen to your customers, it should automatically go together, but unfortunately that is not always the case. And it is imperative. And of course we talked about, how critically important people are in making this all happen. So very good advice, very good insights, Sae. I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
It was great. Thank you. For more content, be sure to check us out at www.futureoffieldservice.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well as Twitter at @thefutureoffs. The Future of Field Service podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more about IFS service management by visiting www.ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.